Peace. Welcome to Spearz and Mic's podcast, where we talk about hip hop culture, knowledge, and the streets. And we got a special guest today, Zulu King Tone, in the building with us. And we're gonna give you his story. The brother, we're honored to have the brother with us. And we're gonna get to hear his story. I'm your co-host, Zulu King L1. We got the brother Zulu King Just P, and
Peace,
we got the
peace,
brother Shaka Zulu Watt Slice.
Peace.
Um, and like I said, honored to have our guest Zulu King Tone. Peace.
peace, peace.
Tone,
Peace to
can
everybody
you
out
tell
there.
us?
No.
Yes, sir. Tone, can you tell us about like where you from and your upbringing and all of that?
All right, well, I was born in 1970 in Brooklyn, New York, in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. My family comes from from Puerto Rico. We're the first, me, my cousins, all of us, our line was the first generation born here in the United States. Everybody else came from Puerto Rico right after, like, in the 50s was the first major wave of migrations, into New York. So that whole era was like my grandmother came and she brought my mother with her. My mother was, I guess, around 15 or something like that.
Mm,
And then from there, I grew up in Brooklyn, mostly like the Bushwick section, East New York, East Flatbush. I was in Canarsie for a while. We moved around because my mom was always trying to like move us up. You know what I'm saying? To
mm,
like a little better. Each time was like trying to
mm,
little step up. So we went from
right.
Crown Heights, then we moved to Bushwick, which was like close to Ridgewood. So it was almost Queens. So it was kind of getting a little bit better. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So finally we ended up in Canarsie, which was all Italian. And that's
Mm,
when we was like, you know, I guess you could say middle class due to the efforts of my moms and my pops, and this they work really hard.
no doubt. Peace to the
Word.
queen for
Oh, no doubt,
striving
no
to
doubt.
striving to give y'all a better situation. And that's
But
a Canarsie that's way different than what Canarsie is now. Um,
yeah, no, That's Canarsie in the '80s. Okay, this is when the Lucchese was still strong. This is
Mm.
when Roy DeMeo was still alive. All right. That Gemini Lounge, just a quick side note. I don't know if y'all ever heard about the
of
Gemini
course,
Lounge.
of
Yeah,
Okay.
course.
yeah.
So that Gemini Lounge, now my mom's was paying for us to go to this Catholic school, right? Because that was like at the time the only private school you really could go to in Brooklyn. If you wanted to get a good education, it's a public school or you go to Catholic school, right?
Hmm.
So when going to Catholic school, of course, everybody that's where you met all the Italians. I got a lot of strong Italian connections, by the way. Like grew up with my peeps, you know what I'm saying?
No
Good
doubt.
people and shit. But like we bumped the heads too, because that's around the time of like Bensonhurst. I don't know if y'all remember, like, I think you was Yusef Hawkins
Of
when he
Yep,
had
course.
when
yep,
Bensonhurst.
yep.
Okay, so we're
Definitely.
going back to this era, right? So you know, uh, I was coming home from school one day, and I was walking past that Gemini Lounge. It was across the street, and I stopped at this bakery because there was this bakery we used to stop and get cannolis and shit like that, right? It's like a Italian pastry. It's real
Hmm.
good. It's filled with cream and shit. So we used to get the cannolis, and then the lady told me, I never forget this. The lady said, she said, "You see that place over there?" She pointed to that place across the street, and she goes, "Don't go near there." She told me, "Don't go near there. Stay on this side of the street. Just go home. Go home." Because they were looking at me because I'm the only black kid in the Italian neighborhood. And I'm walking
Right,
around like I got a license because I got a couple friends, and I guess they talked to people and made it okay for me to walk around, but I can't really wander around the neighborhoods. You know what I'm saying? I got to be going
right.
straight home. So the lady put me up a game. And then years later, when I found out about the Roy DeMeo thing and everything in the Gemini Lounge, it was like, it flashed back to me like, man, you never realize how close you are to like danger sometimes. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right,
Especially growing up in New York in that era. But
right.
yeah,
R-
that was just part of my childhood memories and shit growing up. And then, of course, hip hop, that was at the time when hip hop was really first coming out. I mean, for us, this is like, I wouldn't say the time of hip hop because that's a lie, because it was out in the '70s when I was just a baby. I couldn't really enjoy it. I remember hearing old Cold Crush tapes in '78, '79, but I was 7 years old. So, I'm listening to my cousins playing it, you know what I'm saying? My older
mhm.
cousins and people like that. It wasn't until like the '80s with Big Daddy Kane and Rakim and everybody when they started coming out. Of course, Rapper's Delight was the big thing, and then the message
Hmm.
was the real shit. So
Hmm.
at that time, I was going through that whole experience just like I guess every other youth in New York was doing at that time. And at that time, hip hop was a thing that like I tell people this and they don't understand it, but like on a Friday night, when we was getting ready to, like, let's say, go to the Deuce, like, because we would all gather up in Brooklyn and we would get 40s and blunts, right? And we'd be in the park, and then from there we'd hit the train. It was all part of the night. It was like a whole ritual, right? We'd go to the park and then we'd take the train to the Deuce, come out on the Deuce, and at that time, that's when the Deuce was the Deuce. You know what I'm saying? Like, as soon as
Word.
you came out, it was lights, camera, action, bam, you know,
Mm-hmm.
hookers, hoes, taxis and shit, everything. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
people trying to sell you drugs, or it's just like you information overload. Nowadays, it ain't nothing because kids are used to multitasking, but in our era, lights and
Mm-hmm.
all that flash and shit was like, yo, this shit is crazy. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like where we really started to like really experience the hip hop experience in terms of like I'll be on Broadway Junction getting ready to catch the A train, and you could just feel like the energy pulsing from the city. Like it's the summertime, you know what I'm saying? It's just like you could feel the hip hop in the air kind of thing.
Word. Word.
And we experienced every element of it. My notebook in school looked like a graffiti black book. All my
Word.
notes was in graffiti. That's the only
Word.
way I knew how to write for a while. You know what I'm saying? It was like in
Right. Right.
graffiti. It was
Right.
just like natural to us. You know what I mean? So that's how that came along, and I started writing. I was writing for a while. I was mentored by people like Staff 27, Web One, Fast, people like that. Mo, Kilo One, Fe. These are like writers. Sonic was a big influence when it came to like doing pieces because Sonic is a master. He's a beast, and he used to date my cousin, so we used to hang out. So like that was really the first element that I really got involved with
Mm.
was on the graph side. I used to write Rave One, and I
Mm.
was mostly on the L trains and like the Franklin Avenue shuttle was one of the systems we used to hit a lot.
Man, I feel like I've seen that before, King, for real. Like,
Rave
so,
One,
like,
Rave
you
One.
know, I grew up in Brooklyn. Like, man, like I was all over, of course. Like, um,
Yeah, I was sick with it for a minute, you know what I'm saying? Like everybody else, we were just going off with the shit. And then after that came the b-boying, because to me that was the next element that like I kind of graduated to was like the
mm,
b-boy aspect, just because it was more physical, it was more of an athletic kind of thing, athletic expression. And I kind of gravitated to that more than the DJing. The DJing, you know, for me at the time, I kind of thought it was a little bit boring because I was like, yo, the DJ's in the booth, like you're in the back. The party's out here, you know what I'm saying? All the
right,
girls
right,
are out here, the students out here, you know what I'm
right.
saying? Y'all in the back just making the party happen. But yeah, you do get to like, because you get to be the center of attention if it's a show or something like that. But if you just do playing the jam, you in the background letting everybody else have fun. So that was the last element I graduated towards. But my first contact with Zulu Nation was in '86. This was in Brooklyn, and at this time we had a little b-boy crew,
Mm,
and we thought we was doing something. You know what I mean? We had battled all the other little crews in the area, and we won. So we thought that we was the shit, right? So we was on the block with this one time, and we was really not even we was not really in no kind of condition to even really be dancing because we had already started drinking and shit. But this dude came down the block and he was like, yo, some of my friends, they want to battle y'all. So now this is a dude that we already scrubbed him and his boys off the map like a couple of weeks ago. So we were like, bring your peoples and shit, whatever.
right.
All of a sudden we saw like 10 people coming, like we on the middle of the block. We see like 10 people on one side of the block carrying a linoleum start coming down the block. And then on this side, we seen like another 12 people, and the dude had the radio. So they came down, like they surrounded us in a way. It was a psychological shit. They came from both sides to the middle of the block we was at, threw out the linoleum, put the radio on, and we went for hours and shit. It was only three of us, and it
Mm,
was like it seemed like they just kept coming, and they were doing routines and shit. We were like, yo,
mm,
we
mm,
lost. Long story short.
mm.
But as soon as we lost, we were like, yo, they came up to us, they gave us props. They were like, yo, y'all did your thing. Y'all held that shit down. Blah, blah, blah. They introduced, I don't remember because it was a long time ago, but they introduced themselves and they was like, yo, this is the local Zulu Nation chapter. We're going to be meeting at Tilden High School. That was the public school, Tilden High
Mhm,
School. We're going to be in like the community room, whatever the community said. Like, they had a rec room that they used to open up for the kids to come and play basketball, whatever.
mhm,
So they were like, we're going to be there. So I started coming around for a little while. But then I kind of fell off with that because, there was so many things to experience and you growing up and things be changing so quick. And I had jobs and shit. I was working here, working there. So, I kind of like I kind of like drifted away from that and got into the martial arts really heavy.
Hmm.
I mean, I had been in the martial arts since I was 7 because my cousins was doing it and I was learning for them. But like when I really joined the school and got into it to where it was like I was basically a disciple to this shit. You know what I
What
mean?
were you studying? What were you studying?
Well, I studied ninjitsu under Ronald Duncan and Felix Vasquez.
Okay.
I came in under Shihan Vasquez, and I got my Sandan up to him. I went up to Sandan with him, but once I became my Shodan, which is my first degree, I started training with Master Duncan in the Way to Win system, which is my teacher's teacher, and I went all the way up to I believe it was Yondan, which is the fourth degree, and I opened my own school in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So
Okay.
it was an offshoot of my instructor's school, and I had it there in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And then eventually I went to Japan. That's how I ended up going to Japan, was connected to
Oh,
that.
that's what brought you to Japan.
Yeah, so I had already kind of had an affinity to Japanese culture just from having grown up because the system that I was in is a ninjitsu, it's a traditional ninjitsu, is a Japanese system. So
Right.
there was a lot of things that I was kind of already up on, and like some Japanese words and things that I already knew. So I kind of like was already like I guess wanted to go there deep down inside somewhere. You know what I mean? I was like, yo, it would be. But at that time, growing up in Brooklyn, you don't think it's ever possible that you're gonna ever go to like Japan. You know
Sure.
what I'm saying? Like I never saw myself ever going to Japan. You know,
Right.
and I'm like Japan, you gotta be crazy. That's like you might as well tell me I'm gonna go to the moon one day. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, it's a trip that I actually ended up going in after all. But before I went to Japan, I actually started training with a Japanese master of ninjutsu. He was like one of the last living masters of ninjutsu in from Japan, and that was special because I had went to a seminar in Long Island. This was after I had already had my school. Went to the seminar, and at that time, people were like trying to discredit a lot of the American ninjutsu schools because they were trying to promote these Japanese masters that had finally started, giving rank to Western students. So their thing
Mm.
was like they were trying to get all the ninjutsu students from all over the country. They were trying to be like, yeah, you guys are learning some fake shit. Come learn the
Mm.
real shit type thing, right?
Mm.
So I felt like I had something to prove because I had a lot of respect for not only my instructor but Master Ronald Duncan. If anybody's martial artist and you know who Ronald Duncan is, he's like one of the pioneers in martial arts, and especially as a black man. He's from Panama. He's Panamanian, but he's a black man. And
Right.
this brother is phenomenal. Just look him up. He's right up there with like Moses Powell,
Or what about like Rob Van Cleef? Like.
Ron Van Cleef, Moses Power, Ronald Duncan. They're all in the same. They're all in the same
Okay.
category. Yeah, they're all in the same category. So I felt like I had something to prove. So when I went to the seminar, I went to represent. So we came to show and prove. So at the end of it, the Japanese master came to me and he gave me props. And you know what humbled me about the whole thing was he never came up to me and said, "Oh, you're great," or "You did such a great job." He came up to me, he bowed, and he said, "You had a good teacher."
Mm.
And I was like, "Wow." You know what I'm saying? It wasn't even about me. He said, "You had a good teacher."
Right.
And he said, "Some techniques look a little different, but I recognize all of them, like where they came from, like the foundation. Like I could see where it came from. A little bit different, a little modified, but he
So
said
you
it's a
were a good
different,
reflection
a
of
good
of
reflection,
your right.
not only of my teacher, because I did the shit like by the letter. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
It was not sloppy at all, and it was organized in the system the way it kind of is in Japan. Now, certain techniques were a little different because we're living in a different environment. Like, when these techniques were originally developed, they were on dirt roads. We walk in concrete.
Hmm.
They had these kind of like flip flops they used to wear. We wear Timbs. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
certain things we had to modify.
You talking
But
about the tabby boots? Like the tabby
yeah, they
boots?
wear the tabbies, which are very comfortable, by the way.
Right.
But we
I've
didn't
worn
have
them
access to
before.
that shit. They wasn't selling
Right.
those at
Mhm.
Models at the time, so we couldn't really get that.
Right.
So we
Right.
had to modify our stuff. So, but that really opened up a doorway for me because I started training with him, even though it was long distance at first. And then when my opportunity came to go to Japan, he opened up a lot of doorways for me in terms of like allowing me access to a lot of traditional Japanese systems and knowledge that they don't really disclose to like Westerners and just foreigners in general, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
That's
Ninjutsu is
crazy.
a very
That's dope.
spiritual system. That's what people are. Ninjitsus are very spiritual. The ninjas were more like monks in a way. They were
Mm-hmm.
ascetics. They were like, you know what I'm saying? That's why people used to ascribe all these different powers to them, you know? But it was
Mm-hmm.
just their ability like to understand like quantum physics, even though they might not have called it that, but how to manipulate certain things and how to use certain energies and have an understanding of nature, you know what I'm saying? And how to coexist with nature in a way to where if they're sitting in the forest hiding, the animals don't stop chirping and shit. When a human being walks into the forest, all animals stop automatically. You could be trying to sneak or whatever. They're going to smell you and they're going to feel you. So that's why when the birds and everything stop, hunters be like, yo, somebody's near here, right? But
Mm.
if another animal's in the forest, they don't stop. You know, everybody keeps doing business as usual. Well, the ninjas were able to hide and the animals would never stop because they would synchronize themselves with nature so they wouldn't stand out like that.
Mm.
So these are the kind of deeper concepts that are not really popular here in the West because people just want to know how to beat people up over here. They just want to know how to
Right.
be the
Right.
aggressor, how to be strong, and all of that
They
stuff.
want the physical part, but not the mental.
Right.
Right.
And you can't have it like that, man, because
No
it's a
discipline.
mind, body, spirit system. It's a holistic
Mm-hmm.
system. And it has to be in balance. And if it's not in balance, then it's not going to work. It's like having a wheel where like only one side is heavy and the other side is light. And that shit is going to like loop every time it
Right.
goes around. It can't
Right.
roll the way it's supposed to roll.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know.
So, how long were you out in Japan for?
So yeah. So let me explain to you how I got to Japan real quick, right? So before I went to Japan, I ended up going to LA. When I went to LA, that's when I opened up another school. I opened up
Mm.
another school in LA near Venice Beach. And at that time, I was teaching under the federation of the guy from Japan now, because I had already graduated from Master Duncan. I moved. I left New York. I went to LA, and then I started teaching. When I reopened my school, I opened it under a new banner and started teaching. And I had that connection with him in Japan. And on this side, I was working as in security. I started off doing security, and I never talked about how I got reintroduced to Zulu Nation, but there's a story
We're,
that where that
we're
comes
gonna get
into it.
there. We'll get there. We'll get there.
So, but yeah, so I was working in security, and I was a security director. I went all the way up to like the corporate level, where I was a director of a high-rise building, which is anything over 40 stories is considered a high-rise skyscraper. It's federally recognized, federally mandated in terms of like regulation and how things are supposed to be laid out and what materials are supposed to be used in it and everything like that. So I had that job and I was studying to be the fire life safety director, which is a really prestigious position that allows you to write policy for evacuations for
Mm-hmm.
anything that's for a class A structure, which is anything over 40 stories. But in order for you to write that policy, you have to know everything there is to know about the rules and regulations of, like, for example, you have to have sprinkler heads that have to have a 60 gallon per minute capacity, and they have to be laid out on a grid of 10 by 10 for however many square foot of building space you have. So if the building is a one city block, then you got to have 60, 60 gallon per minute sprinkler heads on a grid lattice of 10 by 10 to cover that amount of space in case there's a fire. So like there's all these little details that I was studying, and the book is like the bar exam, you could say.
All right.
So right in the middle of me studying for all this stuff, when all that information was still fresh in my head, September 11th happened.
Mm.
Now, at the time September 11th happened, I was already in LA, but I was already in the business. I was doing the same job. I had a high rise. I was working in one of the skyscrapers in LA. So when I was watching it on TV, I kept saying, "That's impossible. That's impossible. That's impossible." Because at that time, it was coming across live, so they really couldn't alter anything. So first of all, I was like, "Where's the water?" Because if you have these sprinkler heads that are 60 gallons per minute, and I know for a fact that the World Trade Center was a whole city block, the buildings took up the footprint. So there should have been gallons, there should have been tons of water. Anything that, like any chairs, anything that wasn't bolted down should have been pouring out of the windows. Okay,
Mm.
you had the fire floors, but you had the other floors that were affected, and the sprinkler system would have went 2 floors below and 2 floors above the fire floor. I know that for a fact because I just studied it. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying to myself, where's the water?
Right.
There's no water. And then this and that, and I just kept watching it. And then when it collapsed at free fall speed into dust, into its own footprint, after burning for like 40 minutes or something like that, when that shit's supposed to be rated to be able to burn for at least 72 hours. And
Mm.
even then you still should have still seen like the beams like sticking up like this. You know what I'm saying? Like there should have been
Right.
something left. It should have never just turned into dust.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
So when that happened and nobody was really questioning it, and at that time I was really heavy into doing the knowledge, you know what I'm saying? Because you know how it used to be back in the day.
Of
We've been
course.
doing
Of
the knowledge
course.
since the 90s.
Of
Mm-hmm.
course.
So
Right.
all of this shit was like we knew it was coming.
Right.
So when I saw that shit, I was like, time to go. It's time to shake the
Right.
spot. It's time to leave the country. So
Word.
that's when I ended up leaving that job and I took a job that was in Japan. That's how I ended up going to Japan.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's
Yep.
crazy. So this is like the early 2000s. You out in Japan now.
I left to go to 2000. Yeah, I left to Japan in 2000, actually. 2001.
Okay.
2001.
Yeah.
Right after
Yeah. The
9/11.
9/11 was
Right after
2001. Yeah.
9/11.
Right. Right.
2001, I was out of there.
Right.
You know what
And
I'm
you linked
saying?
up with like DJ Utaka out there,
Well,
or
so yeah, so here's how that happened. Before I went to LA, when I was still in New York, right? I had when I was when I went to Pennsylvania, I had opened up the school in Pennsylvania. Everything was going good, and then I hooked up with my son's mother, my firstborn, his mom's, right. And I moved her out the hood. It was a ghetto romance. You know how it was like I'm Tony, she was Maria. You know what I'm saying? Bushwick. We whatever. So hooked up, fell in love, whatever. I took her and we moved to Pennsylvania, and then her whole family came with her. And then it was like one thing turned into another, and it didn't end well. So we ended up splitting up. So when we split up, I ended up coming back to New York. So
Mm.
when I came back to New York, I was kind of like going through it, you know what I'm saying? Because I had all these high hopes when I left. I was like, yo, I'm going to go open my school. I'm starting a new family. This is it. I'm on my way. And then this shit hit the fan and I came back and I was depressed. I was like, damn, man, I fucked that up. You know what I'm saying? I'm paying now. I was caught up with the child support shit now. And she was like acting like
Mm.
she wasn't giving a fuck. You know what I'm saying? And I was just like, yo, how did I let this shit happen? You know what I'm saying? How did I not see this coming? All of
Right.
that. So you're going through all that. So at the time I was just looking for work. And I was looking through the newspaper. At that time, we still had to go through the newspaper to find a job. So I was looking through the wanted ads, and I saw this. It was like an ad for something, but it wasn't. It wasn't an employment ad. It was for something else. It was for Zulu Nation. Now this is when we had the office on 34th Street at the New
Mm.
Yorker Hotel, right?
Mm.
This is around the time that we was getting ready to do that Source magazine where they had Bam and Hurt and
Flash and
Flash
Hurt.
on the cover, right?
Yeah.
So I called the number because it had a phone number and everything. So I called the number and somebody, I didn't know who it was at the time, somebody picked up the phone. So I was like, yeah, I told them I did it. I said, I'm calling them. I got my specialty security. I'm just looking for work. And I just want to know if y'all was hiring for something. So the voice on the other side said, yeah, we hiring, come down. So I was like, oh shit. So I hung up the phone, right? So I went to the office. And when I get to the office, I come upstairs. Now, before I went there, I had to come down Bushwick Avenue. So I stopped at, there was a place called the Original Tents of Kedar. That's where Malachi Z. York used to have his thing before when he was Imam Isa, right? When
Mm-hmm.
he had
Mm.
the Ansar Allah Rue community
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
was right there. So he had a little bookstore. So I was used to
Mm.
when I was in the neighborhood, I would stop at the bookstore, get some oils, incense, or whatever, see what books they had, because we was always looking, doing the knowledge. So when I went into this particular spot, I found this book that I wanted. It had something to do with aliens and shit. Stanton Friedman was the author, talking about the Area 51 and shit, whatever. He's a
Mm.
PhD, whatever. He wrote this book. So I bought the book. That was for the train ride. I was reading it on the train, got to 34th Street, went upstairs. Now, when I walked into the office, the first desk that was right there was TC Islam was sitting in the first desk right there.
Mm.
And then when I looked to the left, it was Lucky Strike. He had a desk. King Lucky was sitting right there. King Leo had another desk.
Mm.
And then Bam was in the back, and he had a desk. So
Mm.
I just walked into the office.
R.I.P. to all three of them brothers, man,
More.
for real.
Peace to all three,
More.
no doubt.
More.
Oh,
For
no doubt.
real.
As a matter of fact, I'm gonna tell you right now,
Legendary.
because TC
Legendary.
really,
Mm-hmm.
well, yeah, TC was really what brought me really back into the nation like deep. So I'm gonna tell you the story. So as soon as I came in, his desk was the first one. So he saw me, I saw him, and I was like, "Yo, peace." He said, "Peace, what's up?" And it was like everybody looked like, yo, who you? And I was like, I was on the phone. Somebody told me about an application or something like that. I just came down to fill out the application. And then Bam was like, yeah, that was me. And then
Mm-hmm.
TC said, oh, it's all right. I got this one. So he said, sit down and wait. So I went in the hallway and I sat down. When I went to the hallway, I sat down, I pulled out the book and I started reading it. Now, you know, TC is the funky alien, right? So as soon as I brought
Mm-hmm.
the book out, I started reading about the alien shit. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, you believe in aliens? I said, that depends. I gave him some fucking smart remark and shit. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Then I ended up telling him like, yo, how do you know I'm not, how you know I'm not one or something like that? You know what I'm saying? And he just smiled. And then we was talking. I told him what I came there for. I was like, yeah, you know, security, blah, blah, blah. I'm looking for work, whatever. He was like, all right. He said, well, we're doing a show at SOB's tonight. Meet me over there.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to SOB's that night and I met him. I met KD.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I met
Peace to
Nuff
KD.
Period.
That's a good
I met
brother.
Lil. You know what I'm saying? I met like, you know, the crew, the whole alien crew. You know what I'm saying? Um, and then that was it, man. You know what I'm saying? The party was, the shit went down. I was there. And it wasn't like it was never like he said, all right, you got a job. It was like from that moment on, we just was hanging out. Like I called him
Right,
the
right,
next day and then KD came to my house and he ended up staying with me for like a month. I only had a room. I didn't even have a house. I was renting a room, you know, cause I had just
right, right.
getting back on my feet. And that's how we got tight. And so I already knew everybody. I already knew Bam. I already knew everybody from that point. You know, I was meeting like DXT and everybody like that, who I was really spending a lot more time with. Then I didn't really get to spend because Bam was always busy, or you know, he was always doing his own thing. But like
Touring and
D
all of
was,
that.
but D was always available. You know what I'm saying, and shit like that. So DXT was a big influence in those early days, and we used to do a lot. We used to build a lot. And then I met Utaka when he came because I met DJ Honda first.
Okay, yeah,
I met Honda
legend.
first. And then Utaka came to New York because he was trying to get something mixed down or something. He wanted to do something in the studio or something like that. And he had like one of his assistants or something like that, this girl named Mickey. And that's when I met the girl Mickey and we hooked up. And then she used to live in LA. So we were like pen pals or whatever. And then that's how I ended up coming to LA. And that's how Utaka had a big ass house over there, and
Mm,
she was living there, and everybody was living in there. So I went in, you know, I moved into that spot when I first got there. At this time, Utaka was still in Japan. He was going back and forth.
mm,
So that's how I met Tak, and we was cool. I was in Japan for like, I mean, I was in LA for like 4 or 5 years before I went to Japan.
mm.
So
That's
that's
dope.
how that went down. So by the time I got to Japan, I already had it in, you know what I'm saying? As soon as I got there, I went to see Utaka, and Utaka was really busy. At the time, he had a lot of shit going on. You know, he just had a baby himself, him and his wife. And, you know, the nation out there, like Zulu Nation Japan, had already been established, but it kind of like was just floating. It wasn't really, nothing was really happening. It wasn't really, it needed some energy that Utaka didn't have enough to give it at the time. You know what I'm saying?
Mm,
So it wasn't dead, it was still functioning. It was the whole network, the infrastructure was all there.
mm-hmm.
Just needed somebody to like drive it for a minute. So that's how it started. And then I ended up being the president of the Zulu Nation Japan for 10 years.
Yeah, that's what I met you as. You was the president of Zulu Japan. You
Word, I
know,
remember that.
brother spoke highly of you. Was you in Miami for the worldwide leaders meeting in 2003? I feel like you were.
Yeah,
Pete, do
we
you
were
remember
there.
him being there? I know.
Yeah, he was there.
I f-
Yeah, I remember being in Miami. Yeah, I do remember. Damn,
2003,
2003, that
right?
was a long
Yeah,
time ago.
2003. That was
Yeah, we
when
was
like
all.
the.
That's how. I think that's where we met. That's where we met you. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if I
Right.
didn't meet you at a Zulu anniversary, you know, before
Yeah,
that, you
maybe
know,
on
I
it's
the
know we met a
birthday
possible.
couple
before
of
or
times. I
after.
Yeah, yeah,
definitely seen you at a
numerous, yeah,
couple of
numerous,
anniversaries.
Right.
numerous
So you were
times,
definitely
and
there, and
but I believe in
yeah, you
Miami, I
were
believe you was there with us.
there. Yeah,
You know, myself, Righteous, Cassius D,
Word.
Kamazi,
I
you
remember.
know,
Yeah, I
you
remember.
know, right.
I
This is
remember.
where we met Chasm for the first
Right.
time. They were just starting out 206 Zulu that
Right.
same
I
year.
remember he came Kaz came with Kitty Woo.
Right.
You know Kitty Woo.
Of course. Yeah, I know the
Yeah,
queen, of course.
yeah, yeah. I
Because
remember.
I bumped into you at the 206 Zulu anniversary. Me and the
Right.
brother King Red was building with you. You know, that was the first time I had seen you. I think that was 2018. You know, that was the first time I seen you in a long time. You know, at that
Word.
point, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And that's
Yeah, yeah,
already
yeah,
seven
yeah. That's when
years.
I was still in the motorcycle club at that time. I was still doing my
Right,
thing on two. Yeah,
right.
that's what's up.
What brought you into riding? Like, what you know what I'm saying? Because you know you got the hip hop culture, you got the martial arts background, and then what kind of caught your eye about riding?
So like again, going back to Brooklyn and Crown Heights, the first experience I ever had with a motorcycle club was they were called the damn, what was it called, man? Imperial Bikers. That was the name of them, the Imperial Biker MC. And I remember like walking down the block one time, and I remember like it was dark inside their clubhouse, and there was like a lot of shouting and shit going on. I was remember looking in there, and it looked like dangerous, but it was intriguing in some kind of way. And I guess that's kind of like where I first got the bug about like just the whole motorcycle thing. But I didn't really start riding, right away. But we all did the BMX thing. So I did a lot of riding, but I didn't really get into the motorcycle culture till like I want to say about 87 was when I first met my first chingaling.
Mm,
My boy Ace, him and his brother's name is He-Man, and he had another brother named Hannibal, Anibal, and they were all in the chingalings. You know what I'm saying? This is when the chingalings used to have they had a clubhouse in Brooklyn in Red Hook. So, I started building with them and just hanging out with them and shit like that, and I just kind of like, I don't know, that's always been a thing that like, you know, growing up in the hood, there's always like a subculture. That's the whole outlaw subculture. You know what I'm saying?
right.
You know, um, Alien Nest been around it. You know what I'm saying? Fable
Mm-hmm.
been around it. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yep.
just like something that you grow up around. And I just ended up knowing a lot of people that was in. I know a lot of dirty ones from in Brooklyn. I met like, just a lot of. But I didn't really start riding until like I want to say like right before I went to Pennsylvania. So let's say about maybe like 89, 90 was when I started riding like street bikes. Before that, it was just like dirt bikes. The
Mm-hmm.
what was it? The Honda. What was it? The 650 XL 650s or whatever that was supposed to pop. The MB5s when the MB5 era was out. Remember, all these bikes was it was like a passing fad in the 80s. Every year was a different dirt bike that you had to have. You know what I'm saying? So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, and then that was it. And then I just kept going and kept. When I went to Japan, though, was when I really put a lot of. That's when I really started getting a lot of time in because Japan, like, it's a bike culture, it's a cycle culture. So if you ain't riding a scooter, you're riding a bicycle. It's not a bicycle, motorcycles. So
Mm-hmm.
and it's a lot safer to ride out there. So I had a lot of years of practice where I didn't really have to worry about being flat or somebody running into me because you
Or
got people that are more like conscious about other riders and other people on the road. Japanese people are not as selfish sometimes as we can be
mm-hmm.
out here when it comes to driving. You
Right.
know. So that was it. And I just kept going. When I came back, by that time, I already knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to go back to work in the custom motorcycle industry because I had a business that I wanted to do shipping Harley Davidsons to Japan because I had a whole bunch of contacts over there. So, but in
Mm.
order for me to do that, I had to have my skills up. So I came back, went to school for it, and then I went to work for Harley Davidson for a couple years and just did my thing.
That's dope. That's dope. I never even thought about like Harleys even being out in Japan. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, it's a big subculture. Even though their bikes are better than ours, like their technology is just better than ours. The reason why I say it is because they just take more pride in what they do. That's all. You know what I'm saying?
mm,
It's like that movie, The Last Samurai, where Tom Cruise, he was saying that these people, from the minute they wake up till they go to sleep, whatever they dedicate themselves to, they do that shit 100%. It's
right,
true. You know what I'm saying?
right.
That's just the way they are. So, you can't really go wrong with Japanese technology and products, but they just don't have the cool factor that
Mm,
Harley Davidson brings out. So that's, it's
yeah,
a subculture and people out there like it. But I was just trying to think of some business that I could do so that I don't waste the years that I spent in Japan and I come back here and it's like, okay, I spent 10 years over there for what? I was like,
right.
at least I might as well make an international business with my contacts over there.
Right.
and try to keep things going. So that's what I
Right.
did, and I still keep in touch with everybody over there.
Right. Right.
But now we're doing it on a different level because now it's all about robotics. Now it's all about AI. Now it's all about electric vehicles. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm on now.
Um, in the past year, I would say, mainly in the past maybe 6 months, is the topic has become really hot, like with Puerto Rican's role in hip hop culture, and some people are disputing the validity of Puerto Rican's contributions. Um, when many know it's solidified, you know what I mean? Those that know the culture, for the real culture, know that Puerto Ricans contributed a big piece to the culture. What do you feel about that? Like, because not only, you have the dual dynamic
Hmm.
of being Puerto Rican, but yet also being a brother. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, so speak on that a little bit from your own viewpoint and experience.
Well, that's a good question, and I'm glad you asked me that, man. Because when it first came out and I first heard it, it was crazy. I actually had to do a little YouTube video on it, which I did. But to put it to sum it up, man, it's like um, first of all, I'm not an anomaly. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of black Latinos out there. You just don't know it because people automatically assume that they just see the person black, they don't know who he is. So for them to
Hmm.
say that there were no Puerto Ricans around the time, how do you know? If we're
Right.
all in the room, you wouldn't even know who's standing next to you 9 times out of
Hmm.
10. All right, but we're talking about like the impact on hip hop and like as performers, right? Well, we already know when we go back to Cold Crush and Charlie Chase and everything, everybody knows that. But if you look deeper, I like to look at things like from a more like philosophical aspect. And if you really think about it, there's a thread of expression, right? Musical expression, spiritual expression that came all the way from Africa all throughout the slave trade, all throughout the diaspora that had a reflection in the United States that we ended up calling hip hop. But to be honest with you, none of it is really new. It is just a reinterpretation of an energy. You know what I'm saying? Um, so the whole call and response, everybody say ho, ho, that ain't new. They've been doing call and response. You know what I'm saying? If you
Hmm.
listen to the old Yoruba music from Africa, everything if it don't have call and response, it's not a song.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Because they believed that there had to be an exchange of energy. The only difference is that back then we understood the science and the power of sound and how to use that sound to create a resonant frequency. We understood that why you had to have the call and response so that you had the exchange of the energy, right, on a spiritual level. So we
Hmm.
understood music on a spiritual level. By the time we got here, a lot of that was stripped away because of the process, right? So when the brainwashing process happened, we didn't understand why we were doing certain things, but we just knew it felt good because on the genetic level, on the DNA level, we still had the memory of it. So that memory is what we're tapping into every time we come out with a new expression of our music and our forms of cultural expression. It's that memory. So you really can't say that like, well, what they call that FBAs, foundational Black Americans. So you can't. It started with us. Well, that's not true. It actually started in Africa, if you
Hmm.
really want to think about it. And then the second part of that is that you had these other musical forms that we created, like jazz, right, and the other musical forms that came before what we call hip hop that already existed. And I was listening to what is his name, man? Rob One from the X-Men.
Hmm.
He
Rob
was saying
Swift.
that
Rob Swift.
Rob Swift, my bad,
Yeah.
Rob Swift from the X-Men, and he was talking about how back in the day, a song didn't become hip hop until the DJ put his hand on it. So if the song, when he picked the song, it might have been a rock song when it first
Mm.
started, like Big V, Jimmy Squire. It didn't become hip hop till the hip hop DJ put it on the turntable and took that piece and made it into hip hop. Once he picked it up and put the regular record back, if you just play the record, it's a rock song.
Hmm.
So that's to say that hip hop came from somewhere. Hip hop is nothing that you can say FBA's invented it because everything that you're drawing from is coming from other sources. So
Mm.
how could you say you really invented it? What we did was we used the innovation to isolate a certain frequency in the music, and that's where it became hip hop. And that is something that we had the ability to do, in my opinion, because of our genetic connection. And that's the reason why Puerto Ricans were able to contribute, because we have the same DNA, whether they want to believe it or not.
Mm.
Even though some were born in the islands, some got dropped off at the islands, some got dropped off in Brazil, some made it here.
Mm-hmm.
But genetically, we all have a similar vein, a similar frequency that's running through all of us. So that's it on that level. You know what I'm saying? And on another level, it's just like you couldn't have a breakbeat if there was no bongo drums, if there was no conga drums.
Mm-hmm.
You ain't got a breakbeat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the most famous breakbeats that you know of is all conga drums and bongo drums. Where did
Right.
that shit come from? So, you know, I think it's a silly argument, to be honest with you. To sum it up, I think it's divisive. I think it's
Indeed.
I think it's like going back to some shit that's a hurdle that we already got over a long time ago.
Right.
And
Right.
like, look, let's be real, man. Yeah, they might have had some people that, listen, I'm gonna tell you the truth. My cousin, she's Puerto Rican, she's like Indian looking. We call her India, right? She used to hate black girls. I can't stand black bitches. Why? Because she went to public school, and because she was light skinned and had good hair, everybody used to fuck with her and they thought she was soft. So she used to have to squabble up all the time. So there was that dynamic. It wasn't that she hated black people. She loved me. She loved my sister. She loved everybody in the family. She knew she was black too.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the dynamics of growing up in the hood and, that kind of mental illness that we all grow up with in society, where, you got this side against that side, the short ones
Mm-hmm.
against the tall ones, this. So
Mm-hmm.
you had that. So, you had a lot of dark skinned females that would hate on the light skin. And then you didn't have to be Puerto Rican. You could have been light skinned black
Right.
and they hate on you. Rob, you know what I'm saying? I'm pretty sure people try to step to you or maybe want to try to test you back in the days when you was a kid because you might be
Yeah,
light skinned
because I'm a fair skinned Puerto Rican. They like, oh, you ain't
until they
Puerto
get to
Rican,
know you and know,
and
yo,
I'm
this
like,
one is not happening.
right, yeah,
You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? So
You have to
that's what
stand
my
on
cousin,
business.
right? So that's what my cousin used to be like. She used to say that shit sometimes, like, man, I can't stand these black bitches. But now as I got older, I understood why she had that angst. You know what I'm saying? But, and so, yeah, we lucky, excuse me, y'all. I
All
got a
good, all
pit bull.
good, all good.
But she had that resentment because of just the dynamics of growing up in the hood, and I know that was like a lot of Puerto Ricans that might have had a little resentment against brothers in the hood and brothers that didn't like Puerto Ricans. They would come and take all the girls and shit, But that's just like, to me, that's like just family shit.
Right,
Sometimes families we argue about little stuff, but insignificant because when you look at at the end of the day, we still family.
right,
That's how I look at it.
yeah,
We all family.
right. I definitely hear you. And my experiences, as a like 45-year-old, like the dynamic, the brothers and the Puerto Ricans, we were one. Like I never had like any racism towards me from the brothers growing up in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, and Sumner houses. I would say it might have been 40% Puerto Rican, the buildings that I was in, and 60% African American, and we were one. There wasn't no difference. There wasn't no division amongst us. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what was going on in other areas, but from my own experiences, we were one. You know what I'm saying? I even grew up around ex-Panthers that used to just still have the black leather jacket, and they were used to just give me like this energy, man, this love, and I would see that strength, and I formed such a bond with the brothers growing up, man, that I could never see it any other way. Like, so when I see brothers from, identifying with the FBA, disrespecting Puerto Ricans and the contributions, it's bugged out because I don't think they understand the dynamic of our experiences and the cultural exchange that we all had in Brooklyn, the
I
Bronx,
think it's a New
Queens,
York
New
thing.
York.
Right.
Right.
Right. It's a New
It's a
York
big
thing. It's
bond.
definitely a New York thing. You go to other states. Like I moved out of New York. I live in Pennsylvania now, and even in Philly, like in North Philly, where you have like a section of Puerto Ricans. um, they be like, yo, that's them Ricans. And I'm like, nah, man. Like, I grew up with them. I'm like so-called, I would be considered so-called FBA, but I grew up with Haitians next door to me, Jamaicans, Puerto Ricans, went to school my whole life with so-called Caribbean people. And it's never been like a racist thing. Never. It's
Right.
never been
Right.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's like exclusive to New York. I think New York is unique in that regard when we could all like be in a melting pot and be able to get along and be family for real,
Right.
for real.
Exactly,
Indeed.
because at the end of the day, you know what I'm saying, we all living with the same circumstances, you know what I'm saying? We all dealing with the same things. And especially nowadays that we have access to so much more information, I think it's like I think it's really messed up that like some of the people that I've seen that have been putting this forward are people that you would expect better from because they're
Mhm.
supposedly elders in the community or people that have been around, people that you know you had a lot of respect for,
And claim to
musicians,
be well
artists, you know what
read
I'm saying?
too. They claim to be
Huh?
well read too. They claim to be well
Right,
read.
supposedly well read or
Right.
whatever, you know what I'm saying? Supposedly doing the knowledge and all that, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So you expect this person to do better, you know, but it's like that was really disappointing at first. But you know, I one thing I respect about like let's say like about Crazy Legs, he held back for a long time and did because he was like, you know what, I'm not even gonna give that shit the dignity of my attention. You know what I'm saying? It's like such a stupid statement that I'm not even going to talk about it. But you know, I said something about it because it started picking up traction, and I was like, yo, you know what? This is crazy. Like somebody needs to say something. So at least within my sphere of influence to the people that I deal with, I wanted to give my opinion. So that's why I made that video. Like, yo, you got to be kidding me, man. Um, you know, there there is no African American struggle without the contribution of the Caribbean, of Africans from the Caribbean. If there was no Marcus Garvey,
Mhm.
if there was no Toussaint Louverture, you
Mhm.
know, Dessalines, if it wasn't for these people, you know,
It's a fact.
when they caught Nat Turner and said, "Who's your leader?" He said, "Jean-Jacques Dessalines in Haiti. That's my leader."
Hmm.
It's a fact.
People don't, they don't, they, you know, and so by creating these divisions and trying to create divisions, what they're doing is disconnecting us from ourselves, disconnecting us from our
Mm.
true history and our timeline, and disconnecting ourselves from our power. Because if a tree doesn't know its roots, it can't stand. If a tree don't have roots, it can't stand. You know, we're all part of a continuum, right? In our consciousness, in our DNA, in our spirituality. It's just different, multifaceted reflections of that, but it's still a part of a whole. The minute you start letting them dissect that, that's how we ended up in the state that we're in right now. So I'm surprised that somebody that's supposed to be so well read and so intellectual and so understanding, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, he got all three. He said, "What happened?
Hmm.
How could you be a part of this? You know what I'm saying? How you supposed to know better?"
All right.
So, you
Well,
know,
we're as Zulus, we're still striving to keep this unity going strong forever, speak the true culture, speak the truth on the matter, and keep us unified, keep the people unified. I've never experienced anything like in my 20, almost 28 years being Zulu, we've always been unified. The brothers with
always,
the Puerto Ricans, solid. And this goes before us. It was within the Black Spades. It was in the Ghetto Brothers. It was in the Savage Nomads, the Savage Skulls, the Seven Immortals. All of these groups had a dynamic with the Puerto Ricans and the Black Brothers unified, strong as one. And the Zulus were looking to continue that now and forever. You know what I'm saying?
of course, because Zulu Nation was always an elevation. It started off as an elevating entity that was supposed to be bringing people out of a certain mind state. And yeah, it's true. There was some gangsters. I'll be honest with you, like a lot of the original Puerto Rican gangs, like the ones in Bay Ridge and stuff like that. Yeah, they were a little bit like Puerto Ricans only. But it's
Mm-hmm.
not because. But that's how everybody was, right? You had the Hell's Angels that was all whites only. You know, it
Mm-hmm.
was you coming out of a time of separation, and you know, that doesn't make it right. But when Zulu Nation came around, it came at a time when it was a unifying factor. You know what I'm saying? It was a time when we were moving away from that separatism, away from all the stuff that was the '60s into what was the '70s, which was supposed to be one nation under a groove, right?
So did.
So Zulu Nation has always been one of the core principles of Zulu Nation. But of course, not everybody's in Zulu Nation. So yeah, you do have other people that prescribe to that mentality of separatism, you know. And some people they'll never make their way out of that because to them they associate that with reality. They don't think that well, that's just the way the world is. So they just say, well, that's just the way I'm gonna be. Or some people just can't help it. I mean, if you're in prison, you got to pick a side, right? That's what they say. So,
I hear you.
but I'm gonna tell you one last thing on this, man. When I was coming up, man, I remember one time because back in the day, your grandparents used to tell you that like they wanted you to be proud of the fact that you were Puerto Rican. You know what I'm saying? And my grandmother would always tell me about growing up in Puerto Rico and always talk about Puerto Rico to me. And she always used to tell me like, oh, you're not black, you Puerto Rican. You're not black, you Puerto Rican. But her English was fucked up anyway. But she didn't mean it like not to have pride or to be ashamed of being black, but not to walk around like you don't have your head on. Like to know yourself, to know your history, know your culture. Don't be like these Negra Americano, you know what I'm saying? These black Americans that were just people that, grew up in the hood that maybe never had knowledge of self. You know what I'm saying? Never got exposed to the knowledge of self. So yeah, you are running around out here like a chicken without a head because you don't got knowledge of self. You lost. You know what I'm saying? So that was what she was trying to warn me of. Don't be like that. But she
Mm-hmm.
didn't have a way to say knowledge of self and all that. So she's just, don't forget you're not black. But she was
Yeah.
saying in Spanish, it sounds
Know your
different.
roots. Know your
Yeah, when
roots.
she says it in Spanish, it doesn't sound like racist. She says, tú no eres
Right.
como este negro americano. Recuérdate que tú eres boricua, tú eres puertorriqueño. You know what I'm saying? So one time I went to the park with that bullshit, right? And we in the park playing handball and everything, and the older brothers was in a cipher. And somebody said something, and I must have been about 13 years old, 14. And they was like, and I said, I'm not black, I'm Puerto Rican. And they all stopped and looked at me, and then they started laughing. They all started laughing at me, like they clowned me. They was laughing at me. And then the one brother said, man, the white man don't care what kind of nigga you are. And
Mm.
that shit never left me.
Mm.
That shit never, they don't care what kind you are. You could be a Puerto Rican nigga, you could be a Colombian nigga, you could be a, you know what I'm saying,
Mm-hmm.
Panamanian nigga. They don't give a
Mm-hmm.
fuck. At the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, they gonna see you as that's what it is.
Mm.
So that was one of the major factors that changed my perspective. So when people ask me if you black, I say, yeah, I'm black. Are you Puerto Rican? Yeah. Well, which one? Both.
Right. Right.
I'm a black Puerto Rican,
Right.
but I'm black first
Mm.
because when anybody sees me, that's what they're gonna represent you as.
Right. Man. Heavy, you dropped a lot of jewels on us today, King, for real.
Now it
Yo,
was my pleasure,
no,
man. If it was up to me,
no,
we could keep talking. One of these days, we're gonna have
Yeah.
to build again.
Yeah,
no,
most
absolutely.
definitely. Most definitely. The pleasure and the honor is ours, you know what I mean, to have you here
Indeed.
to just know your story on a greater level. Just want to share it with the young Zulus, the true hip hop heads, our listeners. And you're always welcome to come on here, drop some jewels on us, build with us. The platform is for us. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
no
So
doubt.
you're welcome to be here. It will be our honor to have you here again to
Mm,
build anytime.
No doubt. You know what I'm saying? If you got
word.
a specific topic you want to build about, you can hit me on the side, let me know. You know what I'm saying?
No
We could
doubt,
put
no
some,
doubt,
put some facts together.
no
We could
doubt.
do it. We have a build session. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, if anybody wants to reach out to you, do you have any ways, like any social media that you want to plug out?
Um, well, you got all my social media stuff like that, so you can, you can share it on however you share it on the link or whatever. I don't got nothing else that I'm like really promoting right now.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, you know what I'm saying. In the future, I will. Right now, to be honest with you, I've been doing a lot of like um folkloric music. You know what I'm saying, like traditional Puerto Rican bomba plena, Cuban rumba, and the bata, which is the three drums. You know what I'm saying? So like I've been dealing with a lot of really, 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 really awesome artists here in the Bay Area, and pretty soon we're gonna start recording some of our shows and some of our rumbazos and stuff like that. So, when that time comes, I'd like you to share that information out there
Yeah,
so people could
definitely.
tune in.
Absolutely.
If you're a fan of music, if you like Afro Latin, Afro Caribbean live music, these are
Yeah,
torchbearers, these are culture bearers that are holding on to these traditional cultures. A lot of these are young people that are just coming out of Cuba for the first time and have a lot to share. So
no doubt, no doubt.
it's gonna be
That's
good.
dope.
What's
Yeah, I
up?
definitely will share all of that whenever you got any links. I'll just keep adding on to the in the description for the video, so people could stay connected with you on that aspect. But again, man, thank you for coming on, to the podcast with us. It's our pleasure and honor to be here with you. You know what I'm
No
saying?
doubt.
And a big salute to you, big brother, for real.
Salute to you, brother.
Word.
Thank you for
Word.
having me, man. Peace, brother.
Peace.
Peace,
Peace.
peace, just peace, peace to the slice to the shaka. Peace to
Peace.
all y'all, man.